introduce Mike. So Mike is a coach with Agile 42. He's been doing this for a very long time. And I say that in like the most genuine way possible. He's a really, really awesome coach. You would have come across him through the meetups, through the conferences. He's really, really good at connecting with people and adding value to your organization. So if you haven't met him before, I just encourage you to give him a quick hello here on the screen and just reach out to him. I will be also posting a link to a Slack group that he set up, which is called Flow ZA after this meetup. It'll just be on the comments. So if you want to continue the conversation with him, he's very passionate about Kanban. As you know from tonight's talk, it's all about flow, and you'll be able to get some contacts and insights from him. So I'll share that afterwards. What is something I should have told them that I missed, Mike?
I couldn't have made up so much stuff about myself. So yeah, it sounds good.
Okay, so then I'm going to hand over to him. So thank you all for joining us. And Mike, if you can tell us all about managing flow, not people.
Yes, thank you. And also, I think just to introduce Rochelle, she is also a coach at Agile 42, also a Kanban trainer like myself. And she's going to be helping me a little bit with fielding questions. Now, I think in the chat, you're able to send chats. They'll only go to the hosts. So myself and Rochelle and Olga are hosts on the call. So if you've got questions as I'm going, or comments like I can't hear, or please repeat, or something like this, then please send them to Rochelle, and she'll either interrupt me or save your question until the end, when we'll do some more Q&A. Rochelle, am I missing anything? Probably.
No, I think also just for the flow of communication, maybe if you can just mute yourself through the talk, and then we'll be able to unmute after if there's questions.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I could make it so that no one can unmute themselves, but let's try to start off with less restriction and see what happens. If it becomes a problem, then I can, the hand of God in the call, the Zoom God, can mute everyone. Okay. Great. So I'm going to attempt to use the technology to share my screen. And hopefully this is going to be a little different to your average slideshow. Here we go. This is a first time for me, so hopefully it works. Is everyone able to see, see my screen? Of course, I can't see anyone else, so that's wonderful. Let me see. Yes, I see some thumbs up, so I'll go with that. Okay. Great, folks. So Rochelle, please interrupt me if there are comments that I'm not noticing. Cool. So thanks for coming, and let's have a look. So in this crazy age, as organizations get bigger and faster and better and more competitive and so on, there's this constant need for management, or is there? And yes, there is a need for management. And the focus of this is thinking about how do we manage, what should we manage actually? So here I've got a picture of two boats that look like they're about to crash. And maybe they don't have decent flow management. Otherwise, yeah, perhaps they wouldn't be crashing. And maybe this is a clue into what we're going to be talking about today. So I want to take the focus off managing people and think about managing the value. So the obligatory Corona slide. So we were in very uncertain times indeed, and we need to keep the wolf away from the door. And the proverbial wolf is money that's flowing out the door, and potentially there's no new money flowing in. So how do we do this generally? Well, if you look at the word wolf and you flip it around, we've got to keep the flow of value. So I'm just finding my pen. So we've got to keep the flow of value moving out the door and probably towards the customer, right? So if we've got value going to a customer, then perhaps we'll get some money from the customer and keep the wolf at bay. So how do we do this? Well, and what is flow? So in Dan Vacanti's book, Actionable Agile Metrics, great read, by the way. It's quite a short book, but there's a lot of really helpful, useful content in it. But he defines flow as the movement of value through a process. So here we've got a light bulb. So this represents somebody gets an idea, and we've got some process steps in order to get to done. And done here equates to money in the bank. I like to think of processes and workflows as terminating probably when there's value achieved, rather than terminating somewhere where work is waiting. And if one also considers the definition of the reason for a company existing, trying to remember now who it was, the name will come to me, but he defined an organization as its primary goal is to create and retain a customer. So it's actually less about the money and more about creating and retaining customers. So we need to deliver value to them, otherwise people are going to leave. So here's the blueprint, right? This is how we install the Agile. Don't worry too much about taking all this in. There's a lot here. I'll be going through it in chunks, but there's this age of organizations wanting to install the Agile because I'm not sure why. Probably because everyone else is doing it, and it sounds like it's got some good promises. Here is a statement that I've heard this actually in a few different organizations. 75% of all projects must be agile within the next 12 months. Well, I don't know. This it worries me a little when I hear statements like this, because what does it mean? And typically, so when one takes a statement like that, one starts thinking, okay, well, here's the way we're going to install the Agile, right? We're going to start off with some team training, because team training is really useful if we're wanting to align language and concepts. And unless we align conceptual understanding, it's going to be quite difficult for us as a group to problem solve together if we've all got different ideas of what's what. So this is a really useful thing to do to enable problem solving, to kind of set a baseline. So good, so far so good. So we're learning about the concepts. Next, we want small teams, right? So if we've got small teams, then things are better, because we know that social structures get, every time you add another person into a group, the number of communication pathways increases almost, it's exponential growth. So in order to keep it real, we like smaller teams. Now, over here, we've got an organization, and it's got a bunch of different silos and So often this is how organizations look when I arrive. So there's a kind of a team, if you like, of business analysts, another team of developers, another team of testers, or department even. And of course, each of these has some kind of a lead or a head of department or a manager who manages the work of those departments. Now, working in silos, I'm hoping that most of us know that this can cause a lot of problems. But one thing that I've noticed in organizations is great. So we split into small teams. The real question is, are these teams cross-functional? So we've got the smaller teams, but often what I see is these are still devs, these are still testers, and so on. So smaller is better, probably, for communication, but are we actually creating cross-functional teams? So, yeah, this is another sort of problem that I notice. Then we focus on some artifacts and roles. So, you know, we've got to know what to do, right? So we kind of say, well, you guys are a team. We need this artifact, this ranked ordered list of what stuff we're going to work on, and we need someone to rank it and own it. So we create this product owner to look after that artifact. The team, of course, has their team board. So everything must be cool, it must be agile, because there's post-its, right? And here we've got some kind of a coach or a scrum master, I guess, whose purpose it is to try and help the system, this team system, to improve. So still, this is sounding reasonably good. So we move on to the next set, right? The next thing in the blueprint, we add some ceremonies. So if we've got stand-ups, we're agile, right? Must be doing it right. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's, of course, it's a good thing. It's a necessary thing. So some kind of stand-ups, we've probably got some kind of planning session where we plan out work. In order to get work into the planning, we probably need to refine it and decide which stuff to work on. Maybe at the end of an iteration, we call a review and we get the whole world to come and have a look at what we've produced. And then, of course, how else would we improve other than have a retrospective? So we add some ceremonies. And by the way, ceremonies or rituals are a great tool for changing culture. So this is quite important stuff. If we move on, so okay, well, now we're going to start measuring, right? And immediately my back gets up a little bit, but we're going to start measuring, and we'll measure the velocity of the team, and we'll measure it in items delivered or story points or something like this, right? And immediately, well, we've kind of got this measure of productivity. So if a team's velocity is high, then they must be producing a lot. And if it's low, then they're probably not producing very much. Is it though? Is it productivity? I'm not sure. And then, of course, what we can do is we can take all the velocities. If we've got more than one team, we can sum them all, and then we get this wonderful, here's the velocity of the organization. So is the organization improving? Well, let's get an improvement coach, and they can coach the organization and improve them along the way. Well, yeah, it's still sounding pretty good. So now we want to roll it out. So we started this with a pilot where we did training, and we did got all the artifacts in place, got the roles in place. Everything is peachy. So now we just cookie cutter this and roll it out. And now the whole organization's agile, right? Or at least 75% of the projects are agile. Yeah, I have my doubts. Because, you know, this looks very neat. In fact, it just looks like an army. the developer army or something. I'm not sure. So, and I know life is a little messier than that. So let's take a look forward. Here's a quote from Russell Ackoff, and it's, you've probably heard it: a system is never the sum of its parts. It is the product of the interactions of its parts. So often when we look at an organization, we go, well, we've got 4 teams. So if we add them together, it's 4 times 1 team, right? And Russell is saying, probably not. In fact, the more teams we add, well, the more interactions are going to take place, right? Probably. So let's have a look and see what reality looks like. So here we've got a product A, and there are 5 teams working on this product. And remember what our teams looked like before. So I'm going to zoom in a bit here and take a look at this team. This team's got this kind of person over here who was looking at the backlog, at the list of work for the team, the input queue, if you like, for this team. But they seem a little distant. I'm not sure if they're even prioritizing this or making sure of what's in it, but they're there, but they're a bit distant. So really there's a deviation from the blueprint, right? Here's 2 teams. One of them seems to have one of these coach people, Scrum Master. They're sharing this product owner person, and but still not too bad. This could work. Over here, well, well, they're measuring, they're tracking. They've got an input queue, but we've got some holes over here, right? No Scrum Master, no product owner. And over here, a pocket of agile excellence. The ACE, the Agile Center for Excellence, will be happy with this team, right? So they're very agile. Nice. Or are they? Let's take a look. The problem is with life, it's never even this simple. So already there's some chinks in the armor, right? So what we do is we simply add another product, right? And now what I'm highlighting, so here's product B, right? And here's product A. And what I'm highlighting with these red arrows are some of the interactions that are required between teams. Classically, what happens when you add more people into a system is you end up with dependencies. And we've got this team in the middle over here, which seems to be both products are dependent on it. So we've got, I call this the dependency team. Companies often call this the core team, or the components team, or the infrastructure team, or I've heard it called many things, but in essence, it's the dependency team. Everyone's dependent on that team. So yes, things get a little more complicated now. So in order to deliver a piece of value, we've actually got all of these interactions often that need to take place to deliver a single piece of value in one product. But each team is agile, right? We've got our backlog and we're going for it. Okay, so how do we manage these interactions? Well, we've probably got this group of people over here. So these are our project managers, and essentially their role within this agile at scale organization is to make sure that the right interactions are happening at the right times. So are the right people speaking to the right people at the right time? The problem is, of course, there's product A, product B, product C, and it's unlikely that we will ever be able to organize this system so that only the right work is happening at the right time. Then enter the TBC, the big chief. The big chief can ask for anything from anyone at any time in the system. And this usually creates, I don't know, a clash of priorities, let's put it that way, and frustrations. So is this agile? I don't know so much. It feels like things might be better at the team level, but what about the actual production of value for the client? I'm not convinced. Looks like a bit of a mess. And that's okay, because life is messy. So let's think about it. If the opposite of flow is wolf, I call this waiting on lead forever. So this is kind of like we're waiting on someone, and the key point here is the word waiting. Waiting is bad. So, and let's just explore that. Like, what is waiting? Whoopsie. Waiting causes angriness and frustration and all sorts of conversations that take a lot of time in and of themselves to have. So probably not such a great thing. Here we've got a process, and we've got, these could be people, they could be teams, they could be departments in an organization, but let's just keep it simple for now. So we've got people, and each person has a list of stuff that they've got to do. And now we're going to have a look and explore. Imagine we're only looking at one of the items in this list and its progress through the whole process. What it's probably going to look like is something like this. Here we've got this is the piece, this is the time that work item is being worked on by the first person. Then, sorry, I've just got to change this a little bit. Then it sits and waits until that work item gets to the top of the next person's queue. And when that happens, then that person works on a little bit. Then it's going to sit waiting again until the next person has time for it, and then they start working on it. And then it sits waiting again, and ultimately gets the last bit of work done on it. Now, so if this is the time across here that it took for that one piece of work to get done, considering that each of these people is 100% busy, they're at capacity because they've got a whole list of stuff to get done. We can express this as flow efficiency. This ratio between, sorry, let me finish writing this. This ratio between active for a piece of work and idle for that same piece of work. So that there's a ratio there, and it comes out as a percentage. And this, so if we look, 100% would mean this entire line would be green. There'd be no wait time. And more realistically, let's say this is, in fact, studies have shown across thousands of organizations that somewhere between 4 to 6% flow efficient. In other words, the green is 4 to 6% of the total time of this line. That's pretty terrifying because we're trying to optimize, we're trying to give these people training and make them work harder and faster, or these teams make them more agile, and they're only working 4 to 6% of the time. The work is sitting idle, the other 90+% idle. That's a bit terrifying. So maybe our efforts are kind of wasted at the individual level or the team level in many senses. Let's have a look at another story. Here we've got an organization, the exact same organization, but look, over here, there are no queues in front of anyone. There is no work happening. Everyone is sitting, I don't know, Facebook, or maybe that's old news, some other tool. Everyone's sitting doing nothing. And then a piece of work arrives, and the first person starts on it. And as soon as they've done, maybe there's a really small handover, but then the next person can start immediately, and so on and so on and so on until it's done. This flow efficiency is a lot higher than the other. Now notice what's going on here. In the first example, the work is waiting. The people are busy. In the second example, the people are idle, the people are waiting, but the work is flowing. And this is really, really key. This is really key. So when I say waiting is bad, it is the work waiting that is bad. The value sitting in a parking lot waiting for someone to work on it because they're busy with something else. So if we want to look at the opposite of flow, really it's waiting work. Let's have a look further. So these queues are backlogs. And where do these queues come from? How do they start? Well, big hairy ideas, that's what that is. So we've got a big hairy idea and BHIs, and the BHIs are usually things that come from high-level senior or executives, so high-level people in the business. They've got superpowers in the business because they've got a lot of influence and kind of a lot of the time, whatever I say goes, kind of people. So, which are useful and needed. However, that creates a problem. It creates the problem of which of these many. So there's 22 BHIs over here. Which of them should we start working on? No, well, mine's important. Yes, mine's also important. Mine's critical. Okay, well, they're all important, so let's get started with all of them, right? Now, the problem with a BHI is that if you look into it, so usually a BHI is, we need a new storefront for our company. Well, nice one-liner, but as soon as we start getting into the detail, we realize there's a whole bunch of items that need to be produced in order to satisfy that request. And then if we consider, well, there's another 21 BHIs, each with its own set of 12 or 20 items, the effect on the teams that need to produce these items is, I've got this volume knob here, right? What happens is we amplify every time we add one more initiative, big hairy item or initiative or project, these kinds of things. It turns up the volume another notch on the team level. So it's kind of, in my world, I think it's really easy to come up with new ideas. And I can come up with ideas way faster than I can have them materialize or develop them, right? So maybe there's something in this. We need to be a little more concerned about how many of these things we start so that we can get them done. So, right. And here's an effect, a cause and effect. So when the people in the teams and management are all 100% utilized, already it's a bit of a pressure cooker, right? So I don't know about you, but when I'm frantically overwhelmed, I tend to behave a little less than less than awesome. So we've got frustration here, we've got people sweating, we've got these long queues causing overwhelm and concern for pace, sustainable pace and so on. And at the same time, delivery rate is getting worse and worse, and we're crawling. Now, how does that happen? We're working harder, like we're working flat out, 100% utilization, and delivery is crawling. Well, this happens more often than you think. I see this in most places I go, actually. And here are some classic management responses to this. So the teams must work smarter. People must, the problem is the teams. They must work smarter. Get them training so that they can be faster and better. People need to take ownership. I hear this one a lot. They need to act like it's they own the company. And I hear this one from middle management quite a lot. We don't have capacity. We need more people. It's kind of a response to the previous things. And the sooner we start, the sooner we finish, right? And if we had to follow these mantras, we would have a real problem with sustainable pace. We would be burning the midnight oil all the time and probably starting even more work and creating even bigger queues and delaying the delivery of value even further. So there has to be a better way. Here is another example of where queues can form. So I was working with a client. In fact, Javi and I were there together. He's on the call. And they had, I guess, in the area that we were working, they had around 30 teams. And I've actually drawn in roughly 30 teams, just so you can get a sense of the number of people involved. And they weren't 4-person teams or 3-people teams. They were like 7 or sometimes 12-people teams. And what they would do is they would start off over here, and they would do this big planning over here. And the items that they planned out were epics, right? And they would do this planning in January. So you might be able to see where this is going, right? Then all of these teams would start refining items from these epics, and they would then go into sprints. And so one of these lines is a sprint, and at the end of a sprint, they would deliver their first increment of product. But wait, it doesn't stop there. So they would continue, and they would deliver their next increment. So here's the first increment sitting, plus the next increment of product. Occasionally they would produce an excremental product, but mostly it was increments. So this kind of thing would go on, and the problem here was they weren't actually deploying or releasing that product. They were just delivering it internally. So this, over time, you can kind of see this big queue of stuff that's waiting for release. So they would release here after some kind of a code freeze. I was going to draw a snowflake, and then I thought it would take too long. So there's some kind of code freeze here in the last month or two or month and a half of the year, and then they would release. So you can imagine all the problems that would come out after that release, and the amount of testing and integration and all sorts of stuff that would have to happen at this end of the process. But we're running a sprint here, right, with the team. We've got a product owner, we've got a scrum master. We must be agile. Okay. So it's time for a poll, I think. I'm getting tired of the sound of my voice. So in South Africa, in Afrikaans, we've got this word dof, which kind of means stupid. It's referring to someone as being dof. They're a bit faded. They're a bit being stupid. So, and I thought it was nice that it was the acronym for the death of flow. So yeah, the poll is, how am I contributing in any small way to reducing flow in my organization? And also, so when the poll pops up on your screen, take a look. There's a couple of questions, the yes, no, but the very top of the poll, it says, do you ever? And then the questions. So just keep that context. I think we've got enough data. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and we'll see some results. And then I'm going to ask Rochelle to join me, share results. So here are the results, and you can scroll through. So Rochelle, are you
Yes,
up
I'm
for
here.
the conversation? Cool.
Cool.
So let's have a look at these. What stands out for you?
So the first one, fast track new items over completing planned work. This is it's interesting actually to see that there's a 30% no for this, because even just by in my own personal life, I think I fall into a habit of sometimes dropping things that I'm busy with for whatever reason that is, to quickly do this, or I get sidetracked with something else, or someone walks past my desk. Well, not now anymore, but my husband does sometimes walk past here and say, hey, have you sent that email, or did you see this funny meme or something? And it causes distractions. So yeah, it's probably good to see that there is still some people that are not fast tracking or trying to create some focus. So
yeah, I think I think there's an element of these that we all do at some point. Well, some of them are a little bit like, I don't necessarily restructure an organization, right? But yeah, I think there's always that nice juicy piece of work that seems more fun than what I'm doing right now. So I'll stop this and do that. Right.
Agreed. Procrastination, a big one. Sometimes I don't even want to. I'm procrastinating, or I don't want to necessarily finish something because I'm getting frustrated or a bit stuck. So then I'll rather pick up something new, or I'll look at something new, and that actually causes a bad habit to form, and it's quite costly to start new work. Rather than finishing work. So
that's interesting. It's also costly unlearning newly learned habits.
Very.
So
Yes.
yes. And probably the one with the highest yeses is start new work to keep yourself busy while you wait. Yes, because if I'm waiting, then people are going to judge me if I'm not working, right? And it's so.
And it's also, I think it's a cultural thing that we've, I don't know why, but it's kind of acceptable to see that if I look busy, then it means that I'm productive, and we're tying productivity with busyness, and it's not about that, and we've kind of lost the plot through the centuries on focusing on the person doing the work so much, rather than actually thinking about the value that they're working on, or the value that the customer would get. So kind of changing that focus from the person to the work rather can add so much more benefit.
So true. And it's not always that easy to see, because when I'm head down in the work, I'm doing stuff, and I'm creating, I'm being awesome, So I don't think these things are done out of malicious attitude or out of anything else, but I want to add value, so don't make me wait, right?
Yes. And before you know it, at the end of the day, you've touched so many pieces of work, or you've started so many different things, but you don't necessarily have anything completed at the end, or at least a certain set of value created at the end, because you've started so many things, and then that makes you feel like, okay, cool, I've got some safety because I've started stuff, right? So it means that it's almost it's good to a certain extent.
There's a phrase for it, like this is how many balls I've got in the air. I've got a lot of balls in the air at the moment, and that sounds precarious if you ask me. If you ever watch those jugglers at the circus, right? So,
Oh, yes.
okay. I'm going to stop sharing the results, and I think the point is, let me just close this, sorry. I think the point is that we all, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes out of judgment, sometimes out of genuine care, we actually contribute to the DORF, the death of flow. It's really easy to contribute to it. So let's see. What can we do? Let's get the sun out on, oh, whoopsie. I see my screen is not updating. Right. What can we do in order to manage flow and actually focus on the flow a bit more? So I always like to start with, not trying to fix everything, but like, let's figure out where we want to improve. And so Klaus Leopold has got a really cool model to help with figuring out where to start. And it's called the flight levels model. If you think of an organization, there's a lot of people in the organization, right? And, well, often. And we've also determined that if we start by working with fixing or helping one person become more effective, it doesn't necessarily help the system, because there is a larger system at play. Just because I'm busy doesn't mean much in the bigger scheme of things in the system. So if our system is trying to produce value, then, so these blocks here are teams, if you like, or operational units that are actually doing the work and producing the value. Then over here, perhaps we've got a product. So let me actually write in here. So these are teams. Sorry, one sec. These are teams. These are products or services. And quite often, we've got more than one team working to deliver a product or a service. And then over here, we've got a strategy or strategic portfolio. Wow. Strategic portfolio. And so just basically what's happening at each layer here. So Klaus calls these, they're flight levels. So if you think about flying in an airplane, when you're close to the ground, you can see a lot of detail, but you can't see very far ahead or behind you. When you're flying up in the stratosphere, you can see very little detail, but you can see a lot of breadth. So there's kind of different levels of granularity here. So this he calls flight level 1, and that's the operational level where we're doing stuff. Flight level 2 is around, well, we've got to synchronize and coordinate the work of these people in order to produce value out here. So I like to think of flight level 2 as it's kind of end to end. Here we receive a request for value, and here we deliver value, right? And that might take the work of many teams to do. So this is a coordination level, right? And then up above in the stratosphere, the strategic portfolio is, well, we've got a whole bunch of products and services, and we need to decide what, as an organization or as a unit here, what are the key priorities of things that we need to do next? So remember those big, hairy ideas. This is probably where we're deciding which big, hairy ideas to do next, or to finish next is maybe a better way of thinking about it. So anyway, so kind of decide where you want to start. So we might decide, I often find starting at this kind of a level, at a single product level, is a good place. Certainly better than team. because the lever for change is a lot larger. Okay, so we've chosen where we want to improve. Then the next thing to do is to visualize the work in flight. Now, you'll notice over here, we've got a whole bunch of different people involved, and these people are representatives of all of the people involved in delivering this work. So this is a workflow. They need to get together and co-create and co-visualize what are the steps that we're using to produce value, and what are the actual value items that are currently in flight in that workflow. So visualize the work. Then identify any large queues and flush them out. So no prizes for who guesses where the large queue is here. It seems pretty obvious, right? Over here, we've got a whole bunch of items and very little downstream. So we've probably got a large queue forming here. And if we want things to flow, then we should reduce the number of items that are in that queue, right? The fewer items there are, the less context switching there is, the faster the items individually will get done. Okay. We also should start with some metrics, maybe. How are we knowing that the change that we're implementing is making a difference? So something I like to measure is the age of work items. So here we can see the age is in days spent in the process. And each of these things is a work item. So here we can see that, generally speaking, our work items are spending in the region of around 30 days in the process before they're finished. And what we're wanting to see over time is that that average age of work items is on the decline, is decreasing. This means our responsiveness is getting faster to the customer. Okay, so we can actually get real metrics that tell us if we're improving or not. Also, we might want to measure the wait time. So here we've got an actual waiting state in our process. We do this, then we do this, then the work sits waiting for, I don't know, take your pick, waiting for authorization, waiting for review, waiting for expert, waiting for, I mean, the list goes on indefinitely, waiting for test, waiting for release, waiting for deploy. Yes, lots and lots of different things. So we should measure the time that things spend in here. And then, of course, we should analyze what are the causes, what are the reasons it's waiting, because in there is a wealth of information about how we might improve our processes. And last but not least, stop starting work and start finishing it, right? Over here, we've got 3 houses that are almost built, but nothing is delivered. So we can't sell them yet. And all we've incurred our costs in building all 3. So that's not that cool. So better than that would be to have just 1 house, and then we can sell it. So the catchphrase here is starting work costs money. Finishing work makes money. Okay. And final slide, I'll leave you with a thought. So optimize your organization to keep people busy if you want to get busy people. How about optimizing for delivering value to customers instead? Cool. That is it, folks.
Okay. So there was a few questions, Mike. If I can maybe jump into and there was a few comments made as well. I think one of the recurring comment was there's these visual slides and stuff that you've created, and the tooling that you've used is amazing. So kudos to that. And then but there was just some confirmation around definitely they've seen silos within silos. and all kinds of stuff like that. The first question that that I'm going to pose to you is a question from Alice saying, whose job do you think it is to educate business on value over productivity metrics?
On value over productivity metrics. So yeah, this is an interesting one. It depends on the leadership. It depends on a lot of things. Classic consultant answer, right? But yeah, I mean, technically it's leadership's it's responsibility to understand that stuff. In reality, the best we can do is help to educate. So as Scrum Masters, I think there are a number of Scrum Masters in this group, obviously being a Scrum Master meetup. These are things that we can help educate on, but beware of trying to teach someone a concept if they're not really wanting to learn it. So what I like to do often is use a kind of an oblique approach and get people interested in a piece of dysfunction in the process. Start measuring stats and say, hey, look, 80% of our items take 60 days to do from start to finish. Wouldn't it be cool if we could reduce that? And then, then leadership types generally gets interested in that question. And then there's an opportunity to run simulations or get a trainer in or a coach in, or run a session, a voluntary session if people want to join. But ultimately, I think it's everyone's job to kind of educate each other. It's a matter of receptiveness and being careful how we do that.
Yes, I agree with that. I think just to state there that I think it shouldn't be a revolutionary approach or a big bang to say, okay, great, now we're completely changing and we're just shifting our focus. It is, like you mentioned, getting that motivation for change and kind of, bringing them on that journey. And then, yeah, it's everyone's responsibility, right? So it's kind of, you need to be that change you wish to see. So yeah, okay, great. So then we've got another question. I think that ties into what you've said now. Any frameworks, templates for defining value metrics? So that's, I think you've mentioned the age of work items, days spent in process is a good starting point. Is there anything else you would like to add to that?
So first off, Alice's battery died. Sorry, Alice. What I'll add to that, I'll just refer back again to Dan Vacanti's book, Actionable Agile Analytics or Actionable Agile Metrics. It's actually a surprisingly light read because he writes it in, it's a nice read. It's not like reading Don Reinhardt or something as a put you to sleep at night book. Anyway, so there's a good book there. And the key things that I would start measuring, and I'll just put it over here. So is number one, if I only measured one thing, I would measure the end date, the date done of each work item. If I was to measure one more thing, I would measure the start date. So if you like, in Scrum, and the velocity is kind of like measuring the end date. But we can do a hell of a lot of cool stuff with just effectively, this is your delivery rate. You can use it for that. But we can do a hell of a lot more with it than that. And then the start date, because this gives us between the start and end date of every item, it gives us the duration that each item took. And we can, oops, yeah. I realize that I'm drawing and you can't
Yes.
see anything. Maybe you'll see it now.
Yes, thanks.
Sorry. So yeah. So I would first measure the end date, then I'd measure the start date. And it's not a lot of stuff to take in, because from there we can get age, we can get a lot of things, forecasts, single item forecasts, and a bunch of different things.
Cool. We've got another few questions. The one is, whose job do you think it is to drive zero idle time? Is it really happening and nobody doing anything about it?
Right. And well, classically, it's the manager's job to drive zero idle time on employees, right? But that's obviously not what we're talking about, yes? So to drive zero idle time on work items, sure. If one looks at the DevOps mindset, it's quite a lot like this. So it's trying to reduce as much and automate as much as possible, so that there's almost no idle time between getting something done and getting it deployed and running in production, right? And it's a similar thing. So a Scrum Master, for example, would be looking at a team level and hopefully starting to look beyond the team at what kinds of things are creating idle time. In Kanban, there's an emerging role of, and it sounds much less exciting, but of a service delivery manager who looks at kind of the delivery statistics gleaned from this kind of information. And again, it's not updating, that's strange. Anyway, from the start and end date kind of information, and starts looking at bringing data into retrospectives, cross-team retrospectives, and so on, in order to improve. And quite simply, there are tools as well which allow one to calculate flow efficiency at the push of a button. And like all tools, it depends on how you use them, etc. But yeah, hopefully that helps.
Cool. I see, Barry, you've raised your hand. I did get a question that you asked. Maybe if you want to ask it yourself, or?
Sure. Sorry, my hand was up to talk about the slides, not following the drawing, but that's sort of. But my real question was, would you change the approach when you're working with different types of organizations? So as an example, like a bank that perhaps has an internal software teams versus a small or medium-sized software shop that has many different customers that don't know about each other and have different contracting models.
Interesting question. Yeah. So I mean, there's no blueprint, right? And when I come at it from, it really depends on what the ask is from the company. So if the problem is we're struggling to deliver and we're working flat out, and it's hard to get to the next level of delivery, then in that kind of context where we're talking about delivery and people's morale and all of these kinds of things, the approach of trying to figure out where you're trying to improve first, it probably is a good question to ask. And this isn't to say, so again, like before I mentioned the agile transition blueprint, which is like the agile and doing training and so on up front, and there's still a lot of good in that, and it often doesn't deliver beyond team level any results if one isn't looking beyond. So I find this managing flow kind of method as a really useful thing to do when we're looking at delivering value to customers across more than one team. So would I change it? Probably. I'd inspect and adapt, but I think the principles of flow are quite sound. Reduce the number of items in process and you will increase flow. It's kind of that simple. Of course, implementing it is not always that simple because there's humans and egos and history involved, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree too. I think the principles should be, I can say the same. The approach would be different because each organization, each team is unique and they're facing unique problems. So yeah. Cool. Let's quickly move on to one of the next questions. Olga, how much time do we have left? Just want to do a time check.
I think if we can just take the last question, that would be great. And then we can offer people to drop off, and those that want to stay on can stay on.
Okay,
That's
great. Okay, cool. So sorry if I don't get to all the questions. One question here is how best do you prevent silos happening within silos? And then Mike, I'm guessing drive it by educating the business you are working inside of. So I think it's like a question with a comment.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing: if one's looking at flow, you're not setting out to restructure an organization from the get-go. So the whole idea here is when we're deciding where we'd like to see improvement, we're overlaying concepts, so this product or service over here could actually span teams here, and I don't know, over here and here in the organization in order to get that product going. And so we're not looking at changing the structure. In fact, we're looking very specifically at how the value flows through the existing structure. And as soon as we start doing that, we start noticing problems. Things that are glaringly obvious if now that we're just looking at it through another lens. So it's often a great way. So as soon as we start getting to this next step of visualizing the work in flight and including the people involved in generating the value in this kind of workshop, then that conversation starts organically. People start noticing, hey, but if we're going to make this happen, these people are having to hand over to these people all the time, and there's this big rift and this massive queue in between. It starts becoming visible on the flight board. So yeah, one can attack it directly, or one can just visualize what's there, and it speaks the truth of what's actually happening. And then we can decide how to act around it. So that's kind of what I like about the approach, is it's unemotional, or it doesn't need to be emotional. It's data-driven. And yeah, we're not telling anyone to change roles or silos or anything. Yeah.
That agile interactions you were speaking about, right? So yeah, okay, cool. Great. I think that was then the last, or the only time we have left. So Olga, on to you.
Thank you to the both of you. Thank you, Rochelle. That was really well held, and thank you for facilitating that. Mike, very, very valuable. Really appreciate your insights, and there's some really cool things to take away from there. And I'm so glad you explained the flight levels. That always needs a little bit more extra explanation. Just a shout out to everyone that's joined us from the Scrum Master community. We're always looking for speakers, so you too can give a awesome presentation like Mike. Probably not as beautifully visually because I've got such envy at the moment. It's gorgeous, gorgeous pictures. But please, this is supposed to be a safe place where you can practice and share and also help grow the community. So thank you very, very much. We don't know what May is going to look like. It might just be an online event, but we'll keep you posted. And if you do want to continue the conversation with Mike, I think you're going to hang around for a few minutes afterwards, but I've also posted it in our meetup channel. There is a Slack link that you can join, and this will take you to the Flow ZA Slack space, and you will be able to chat. It's more focused on Kanban stuff and Flow, and you'll be able to chat with Mike directly and the community there. Any questions?